Hey everyone, how's it going? Happy Friday. Back again. I missed everyone last week. I was off in Minnesota. And actually, I'll explain why I was there in a little bit because that has to do with what I'm going to talk about today. But yeah, I missed everyone last week. I hope everyone had a good past 2 weeks. It's been up to something cool, useful, fun, all that great stuff. But today I want to talk about, um, kind of some thoughts around people getting stuck thinking they need, fancy ways of measuring things in order to be successful or to track progress or to, um, become unstuck. Um, I think one of the common things you see is like, oh, I don't know how much I'm supposed to be eating, so I need to go get my metabolism tested so I can find out what my basal metabolic rate is, and I need to so that I can decide how many calories I should be eating, and at least for me and kind of the people that I interact with or tend to talk to, we tend to get down in the weeds on this very minute particular um, stuff, and it keeps them from thinking that people often think that they can't be successful without knowing these crazy details about their body or physiology, etc. And I'm no different. I mean, I love. I think I've mentioned on here before that I'm a computer scientist by background, and that's what I went to school for. And so I love data. I love being able to measure things. I love being able to track them. I love being able to quantify various different things about my body and my physiology. But over the course of time, as I've uh, done this over the years and years and years, I realize how imprecise and inaccurate and to some degree unnecessary they are, in order to determine, to accomplish whatever goal I'm after. And often there are far less cool and sexy ways to measure these things that are just as good as the cool, fancy gadget is, right? Um, I think if you enjoy the tech and you enjoy the numbers and you enjoy quantifying and tracking these things, and you can detach yourself from the result, in that sometimes the result is not going to be accurate and what it says is not going to be really that impactful in your life, but you still like to track the data, that's fine. I encourage you to do it. That's the way I operate. But I also realize at the same time, as my friend Dr. Tommy Wood likes to say, if the thing you're tracking and the data that you get back from it is detracting from your overall mental health and state and is doing more harm than good, then don't do it. And a lot of people can't detach themselves from what the data says. They can't get over the fact that their Oura ring told them they had a shitty night of sleep, even though they had a great night of sleep. They can't get over the fact that the body fat percentage on their scale went up, even though this, the electrical impedance measurement in the scale is completely, can be affected by a million different things, specifically the water that you have in your body. So in those cases, it's probably not, if you can't detach yourself from those results and realize that there's nuance there and that these things aren't always going to be 100% accurate all the time, then it's probably not useful for you to be using them. And so this past weekend, just to get back to where I was saying, I was in Minnesota. The reason I was in Minnesota is because I was visiting my coach, Dr. Mike T. Nelson, out there. And Dr. Mike T is a great guy, and an engineer by trade. And he, like me, loves the data and the science and collecting the data and tracking things over time. And he has much fancier tools than I do. So he has a metabolic cart, at his house. He has sensors that you can put on your muscle to determine how much oxygen is being utilized by the muscle when it's being exercised. He has a freezer that he's converted into a cold plunge, and so he has a lot of cool stuff there. And I went out there, and not this is the first time I actually met him in person, so that was part of the reason why I went out there. But also, I went out there for him to run various tests on me to see how things were tracking, what my numbers were like, and I also got in the cold plunge as well, and the freezer and all that stuff. But ultimately, it's funny because we with the metabolic cart we measured my resting metabolic rate, which is how many calories I just burn if I was to just lay on my back and not move for 24 hours. And at the end of the test, we looked at the numbers, and the metabolic cart came out and say, "Oh, you burned 1,700 calories." And then I plugged my numbers into one of those not so fancy calculators online that tells you what your basal metabolic rate, and it told me I burnt like 1,600 calories. So even with all the fancy tools, there was only 100-calorie difference between the calculator and the metabolic cart. And that's not to say that either one of those, the calculator or the metabolic cart, is right or accurate or couldn't change from one day to the next because obviously the formula is always going to be the same unless your body weight or body fat percentage changes. But assuming that's relatively stable, the next day I could do my resting metabolic rate test, and it could be 1,600 calories, or it could be 1,800 calories, or it could be 2,000 calories. There's lots of things that affect it. But anyways, it's just ironic that test came out so similar to the not so sexy online calculator. And then the next day we measured my VO2 max. So I put the metabolic cart on. I also had one of those muscle oxygen sensors on my thigh. I got on the 2K. I got on the rower and did a 2K with this mask on my face, and rode as hard as I could for the 2K, and it was terrible as it always is. But at the end of the test, get all the data back, and there's a bunch of different data points. Like there's super cool, it's measuring how much carbohydrates you're burning, how much fat you're burning, and what your heart rate is, and a lot of data that I would never have access to outside of having a metabolic cart, access to a metabolic cart, but in some of the oxygen sensors. But at the end of the day, we looked at what the metabolic cart said my VO2 max was, and I think the metabolic cart said it was 57 milliliters per kilogram per minute. And unsurprisingly, I went to the Concept 2 website, and they have a VO2 max calculator there. So when you do 2K test, you put in your time and your weight and your sex, and guess what? It came out to be the same number. So again, the non-fancy calculator on the Concept 2 website told me the same thing that the fancy metabolic cart told me. Now, obviously, because we had a muscle oxygen sensor on my thigh, I was working as I was doing the 2K. There was some data there that then we could then use to inform some training afterwards, specifically, how long it took for me to deplete the oxygen, the muscle in my thigh, and then how long it took to recover. And then we can inform that to create some very specific interval training that I'm going to incorporate into my training after that. And I wouldn't be able to get that without those types of sensors and fancy data. But ultimately, as far as measuring my VO2 max and my resting metabolic rate, the online calculators were exactly the same. And then lastly, we got in the converted ice tub, freezer, for a little bit of cold exposure. It was like 48 degrees, the water, so it was not terribly cold. People definitely do much colder things, get much colder water, but I got in there, and Honestly, it was a great, I liked it. It was a slightly different experience than taking a cold shower, which I do every morning as well. Um, but ultimately, I don't know if it was enough for me to change to say that I would go buy a freezer and convert it into a cold plunge, because I found that I tolerated the 48-degree weather, 40-degree water perfectly fine, and I felt pretty much the same as if I took a cold plunge, took a cold shower in the morning. So again, the non-fancy cold shower um, was just as good as the fancy cold plunge. And then lastly, this wasn't this past weekend, but I think the week before, 2 weeks before, I went and got a DEXA scan. And a DEXA scan, if you're not familiar, was primarily invented to measure bone density for people who are suffering from osteoporosis and osteopenia, which is like low bone density, which is very serious. But it also can measure your muscle mass and fat mass. So for me, I was primarily looking at muscle mass and fat mass. So basically trying to figure out what my body fat percentage was, and um, it came back with some numbers, but it didn't disagree with the pictures that I had been taking of myself that showed that I had gained lean mass over the past year and a half. So while the pictures don't tell me an exact number, I knew from the pictures that I had put on lean mass, and the DEXA scan reflected that. Just validated those pictures, gave me some numbers basically to work with. So once again, the crude method of just taking pictures of yourself in the mirror in your underwear worked just as well as going to get a very fancy DEXA scan. So I think a lot of times people get caught up in, I need these fancy tools to tell me what I should do next, right? And like I said, to some degree, the VO2 max test did inform some training decisions, but ultimately, it didn't tell me any data. It told me some data, but it didn't differentiate the VO2, for me anyways. The VO2 max that I got was exactly the same as the online calculator. The RMR was very similar. The pictures are very similar to what I would, or reflected what I was going to expect in a DEXA scan. So, don't think that you need all these fancy things to be successful, to know what to do, right? You can do very simple stuff, right? And this includes like the RMR stuff, right? Whether you use an online calculator or you don't, basically, or you get a very fancy, resting metabolic rate test. Basically, the only thing that, the ultimate guide is what's going to be happening on the scale, right? So if you're tracking how many calories you're eating and the scale is staying stable, well, then that is, you're in equilibrium, right? You may not know your resting metabolic rate because you have activity on top of that, but what amount of calories causes you to be weight stable for that amount of activity. And if you want to lose weight, you need to eat less than those calories. And if you want to gain weight, you need to eat more than those calories. If you know the calories that you're eating and you're seeing the scale go up, you're eating more calories than you need to. And that might be what you want, right? If you are eating a certain amount of calories and you're seeing the scale go down, that you're eating fewer calories than you need to, again, if that's what you want to happen. So there's very unscientific, unfancy ways that are going to determine these things, and they're just as useful as the very nerdy, very expensive, high quality stuff, right? That it may not even matter, right? You may go get your RMR test, and ultimately it's the scale and how many calories you're eating that's going to determine whether that number is actually even accurate or not. And that was your RMR on that day, and that was your resting metabolic rate on the day. RMR stands for resting metabolic rate. And that was your VO2 max on that day. That was your body fat percentage on that day. And those things can swing back and forth day to day, right? Depending on a variety of factors. So even if you went back the next day and did the same test, you could get a different number. And so it shows you that how, even though they're really cool and fancy and stuff like that, it's ultimately the very basic things like Do you look like you're putting on muscle? Can you lift more weight? Is your performance at the thing that you care about getting better, regardless of what that VO2 max number is, right? So ultimately, it's the very basic stuff that actually ends up being your guide and the ultimate measure of success and the thing that you care about. And so don't think that you need these fancy tests in order to be successful or make progress. It's cool. I find it cool. I love the data. I have all the data from the tests that we ran over the weekend. I'm creating graphs out of it. I'm looking at correlations between different things, and I like to see how much fat and carbs I was burning during the test and what I was doing when I was resting on the floor. And that stuff fascinates me. I love it, but it's not necessary to be successful, and it's not necessary to make progress. So you can do all these things. I could have done all the things that I'm currently doing and been just as successful doing them without any of these tests at all. So that's what I want to say. I've yammered on about that long enough now. Yeah, so if you want to get more material like this, blog posts and different content that I put out, go to my website. There's a link here on the video, rjbhealth.coach. At the top, you can click the newsletter and enter your email address, and you'll be registered for my email newsletter, which I'll send out all the content to you on a weekly basis to you, so you don't have to follow me on social media and look out for it. I do have some openings for some coaching. I had some clients graduate recently. So I have some spots opening. If you're interested in jumping on and taking advantage of those, please go to my homepage at rjbhealth.coach. Click the schedule discovery call button on the homepage and fill out the form, and we can talk more about that. As always, if you have any questions, comments, want to reach out, talk about anything, whether it's related to what we talked about today or something else, please comment on the video or send me a direct message, and I'm happy to chat with you guys. So with that, I hope everyone has a good weekend, and I'll talk to you all next week.